All right, so we had a little technical difficulty there, so we are finishing up our thought, talking about the 1619 fest. My wife was talking about how the mansion that was on the site had been destroyed twice by fire, and each time the slaves rebuilt it. And one of the things that the tour guide said was that the brick kiln uh, method that the slaves used made the bricks. The ones that they unearthed, they said some of them in quality was just as good as or better than the quality of the bricks made today. The only thing was they said once they unearthed them, if they stayed out in the elements because they had been buried, within 2 years the bricks would disintegrate because of change. But it was like several digs that we're doing, as we stated before, with the trying to find more slave uh, bodies to exhume and check their condition, and also they digging up some of the slave cabins. And I guess when they finish all that, they gotta go to other sites throughout the island. So basically, when they finish, they can make replicas and give a more accurate condition of how the slaves lived while they were there at that plantation. During the presentation, as we stated in the video before, the tour guide said that the things that were done at Jamestown set the tone for how black people would be treated for the remainder of our time here in this country leading up to 2019. One of the things he said was that at one time, some of the slaves, which I'm thinking that most of them were probably the mulatto slaves, the ones that was half and half, because he did mention that that was becoming a problem where the masters were producing so many of these half-caste uh, children that were getting their freedom and going out, and they were starting their own plantations, and sometimes you know marrying with the with whites, that they started creating laws because they felt that if we don't do something, they're gonna outnumber us. Now notice what I just said, marriage. The marriage was the problem. It wasn't that the masters was raping, because that's basically what they were doing, raping the black females. Is that the mulatto children that was being produced, some of them were, I guess, had the so features were so close to white that other white men were marrying them, and they didn't want that. They wanted the wealth to stay within their pure bloodline. So they created eventually laws to state that there could be no marriage between a white and a black. They also had a thing where some slaves were getting their freedom, they was being able to buy their freedom. And he talked about in the, some slave named Elizabeth Key, I think her name was, and she sued to try to get her freedom, and was able to get the freedom using their own laws. And he showed a picture showing them inside the whatever place they was at. It's basically it was the church. They used the church for the government building and the house of worship. And she sued and was able to use their own laws. So they figured out we got to change the law because we do not want these slaves to get their freedom. So the law that they enacted is the one that caused the perpetual slavery to come in play, where it said it doesn't matter what happened with you in the past. If you say you was free, this new law will re-enslave you and all of your children and descendants of them forever.
But the only, but she rather only won because her father was white.
Exactly.
And
her name was
that
Elizabeth
was the rule back
Bernstein.
then. If your father was white, you were considered free.
Yeah.
But like my husband just got this saying, they changed the rules.
The law.
if your mother was a slave,
Yeah.
you would be considered as being a slave.
No matter what.
No matter what.
And they went back, they retro acted
from
it.
The father,
Mm-hmm.
they said, be born of from your
Yeah.
mother that was a slave, you were going to be a slave.
Mm-hmm.
Which until we knew that was a lot of the scenarios,
Yeah.
because the women were getting raped
Mm-hmm.
from the masters or consented through time or whatever, but it wasn't to the benefit of
Yes.
the people, the black people during that time, the slaves.
Yeah, and if you know anything about the people, the black people in Virginia, a lot of them are very, very light-skinned people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them even have, in some of the places in West Virginia, they have blue eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine even a person with their complexion and features, that to them they didn't even want them to have any kind of freedom of movement. And so that was something that had affected us, that happened at Jamestown, that affected the rest of the colonies because they followed suit. The next one was the fact of the church's stance on slavery. Like I said, the governor was just like in the Church of England, the king was head of the Church of England. So here in the colony, in every colony, the governor, even if you had a pastor, in which most of them were Anglican, the governor was the head of the church. With the assistance of the parson or whoever, all these laws were enacted with the blessings in their house of, they use the word God, with the blessings, so that any church denomination, which we came over here and became part of their denomination. All those denominations at their very foundations did not have no problem with slavery. Now we know after slavery they said that Lincoln said that the Emancipation Proclamation was supposed to set us free, but you can find in many instances, like the Southern Baptists and Southern Methodists, a lot of them didn't change their laws on slavery until the 1980s. Mm-hmm. So if a black Baptist church came out of a white Baptist church, you basically came out of a church whose foundation was of slavery, that slavery was blessed, that when these slaves, even though, and he made this point too, he said even they had said that if you was a baptized Christian that you could not be enslaved, but then they changed the laws to try to say that you're not human, therefore we're baptizing you not so much to make you a Christian, but baptizing you because your master is a Christian and he wants his whole household to be sort of like the Catholics when they baptize, some people baptize their dogs and cats and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean that dog and cat is going to heaven. It was the same way with the slaves when they got through changing the law. I said, nah, you might say you're a Christian, but we just baptizing you because we want to say that our household is Christian, including the animals, because they even passed a paper around with the lady Abigail, Angela, and on it they had her listed just above the farm animals, which showed you that was our classification, just slightly above the farm animals. And another thing that they put out that I didn't know is that a lot of the slaves that came here, they was not some of the parts of Africa that they came from. They was not able to acclimatize to Virginia, and a lot of them were dying on the same rate as the white and the Indians, because some of the Indians they had slaved them too. But a lot of the Africans were dying because
I could barely somewhat keep my eyes open. I was just so overwhelmed with the heat. My husband was like, "Are you gonna be okay?" And I was like, "Oh my God, Angela and the other slaves."
She came from the Congo.
Endure that, but God also mentioned that you can't be under the assumption that she was from Africa, she could have handled the heat, because he said there are certain parts in Africa that have mountains or have really cool weather. So to assume that she was able to adapt is not also a true fact. And another thing that happened that my husband mentioned about if your mom was white, or if your dad was, if your father was white, your mom was black, that you would be considered as a slave. But also, it was something else that happened. It was, that law stayed in effect until where blacks and white were prohibited to marry each other, even though we know that was going on because there's a lot of mulattoes that were being born in Virginia. But the law was even up to, was it 1956, 58?
I think it was 50s or whatever when it got overturned.
When the couple wanted to get married.
And they had to go to
a white man and a black lady. They kind of brought the law in effect that it would be disannulled, right? That you could marry out of your
I really
race.
wasn't paying attention to that.
It's a book about it and a movie.
I wasn't really paying attention to that because I would, me personally, I would consider any master that had a black woman, a slave woman back there, would be considered rape because, you know, he was always going to be in a position of power. So how could she, even if she was free, if he wanted her, and that's basically what he also said too. He said they made it where if they just wanted to come up and kill the slave, they passed laws where they could do it. He said they also passed laws where only the slave masters could carry guns, black people could not carry guns. They also enacted laws of freedom of travel, all kinds of stuff that they created at Jamestown, like I said, and it had, he said these repercussions have been felt throughout American history because it was, like I said, their first successful colony. They had the lost colony that happened here in North Carolina in Roanoke, but it wasn't successful. The people, a lot of them died, and they wasn't able to find a lot of them. The ones that did live went back to England. So it was successful, and one of the reasons it was successful was because of this gentleman named, and by the way, we haven't researched to see was he Ashkenazi, but his name was John Rolfe. John Rolfe was the one that helped the governor and all them craft these different laws because he was a merchant. He was a merchant and advisor to these people. He was the one that was, you know, had the ships and everything and was sending the slaves and people back, sending the Indians back to England and stuff, and trying to get the King George them to stay interested. He was the one that lied about let's go back to the slaves being captured on the Portuguese ship. England, Spain, and Portugal at one time had been at war with Spain and Portugal had been at war with England, but when King George came on, he didn't want to have war with them anymore. He wanted to try to get a peace with them. But what happened was they had pirates that during Queen Elizabeth's time, she had commissioned them to go raid the Spanish and the Portuguese because they was at war. And now King George was like trying to reel in the pirates. And so when these two pirate ships that got the 32 slaves out, the Portuguese, when they came into, they was running out of food. They had to come to a colony. When they came to the Jamestown colony, they said needed the slaves. They wanted to trade them for food and whatever. John Rolfe is the one that went in and changed the thing and said the ships was Dutch ships, so that when they sent the report back to England, they wouldn't think they were English pirate ships because they would have got in trouble for bringing slaves that was brought by a pirate ship when King George said he didn't want the pirates. He was hunting the pirates down and it was killing them. So he the one to change the paperwork. Although I do not believe that King George would have did anything to them. Once the slaves were there, they basically said it didn't matter that they didn't have no laws on books for them. They could treat them, and that's when they had to start creating the laws on how the slaves were going to be treated by the English. Not that English didn't have slaves in other colonies, but here in the Americas. Mm-hmm. And so, thinking about like I said, the governor and how everything was enacted in the House of legislature was the church. All of that was, so this so-called thing of separation of church and state, where they said, no,